Imagine this. You are completely free. No one is telling you what to do. There's no one to blame. No rules holding you back. No path already carved out for you. You stand in front of an open field, endless, silent, and suddenly you feel it. Not exhilaration, not joy, but dread. What if freedom isn't the gift we've been taught to cherish, but a burden we are desperate to escape? What if the reason you feel lost, anxious, or numb isn't because you're trapped, but because you've been set free? Jean-Paul Sartre, one of the most influential existentialist philosophers of the 20th century, believed that true freedom is not comforting, it's terrifying. And if you've ever felt overwhelmed by choice, paralyzed by possibility, or crushed by responsibility, you felt the weight of that freedom. According to Sartre, you are condemned to be free. Not granted, not blessed, condemned. Because with total freedom comes total responsibility. Every action you take, every decision you make, is a declaration of who you are. There's no divine script, no cosmic purpose, no pre-written role for you to step into. You must invent yourself, moment by moment, through your choices. And that responsibility is so heavy, so absolute, that many people retreat into roles, ideologies, or distractions. Anything to avoid the unbearable truth that their life is entirely up to them. Today, we're diving deep into the paradox of freedom. We'll explore why true liberty often feels like death. The death of illusions, the death of comfort, the death of who you thought you were. But within that death lies something extraordinary. A chance to live, not as a product of conditioning, not as a pawn of circumstance, but as the author of your own existence. Stay with me, because once we pass through this dark valley, you'll begin to see freedom not just as the absence of chains, but as the fire that forges authenticity. But first, we must confront the terrifying truth that most of us would rather be unfree, if it means we don't have to face ourselves. The process of embracing true freedom, as Sartre saw it, is not one of liberation in the joyful, celebratory sense, but a confrontation. And here's the unsettling truth. Most people will never confront it. They spend their entire lives fleeing from freedom, clinging to certainty, structure, and roles that feel safe. They surrender their freedom in exchange for comfort, and then wonder why they feel hollow inside. We live in a world that praises independence and self-determination, yet subtly demands conformity. From an early age, we are taught what to value, what to pursue, and what success should look like. We are given choices, but only from a narrow menu curated by culture, tradition, and fear. True freedom, the kind that Sartre speaks of, requires us to reject that menu entirely and create our own. But that creation comes at a cost. Freedom, in the existentialist sense, is not just about external liberty. It's about internal responsibility. It means accepting that there is no divine plan, no objective morality etched into the universe, no one coming to save you or assign you meaning. You must create it all from scratch. And when faced with this abyss of meaninglessness, many people recoil. They'd rather be told what to do, what to believe, how to live. Because then, if life falls apart, it's not their fault. But when you accept radical freedom, you also accept radical accountability. Every failure, every regret, every missed opportunity, you own it. There is no one else to blame. This is the weight that makes freedom feel like death. It's the death of certainty, the death of excuses, the death of the false self that relied on external validation and inherited beliefs. And yet, there's something profoundly liberating in that death. Because once the illusions have burned away, what remains is something real, raw, unfiltered, and alive. Sartre believed that in this confrontation with freedom, we also meet our potential. Not the version of ourselves we were told to be, but the one we choose to become. So the question is no longer, are you free? The question is, are you willing to be? What if I told you that everything you think you are, your identity, your beliefs, even your desires, might be nothing more than a carefully assembled defense against freedom? Sartre argued that most people live in what he called bad faith, a kind of self-deception where we deny our own freedom in order to avoid the anxiety it brings. We convince ourselves that we have to do this, or we must be that, when in reality we are making choices every single moment. But rather than confront the terror of that responsibility, we pretend. We pretend we're just playing the role life gave us. We pretend we have no choice. Think about how often you've said to yourself, I can't, when what you really meant was, I won't. How often have you surrendered your agency to circumstances, to fear, or to the expectations of others. That's bad faith. And the more we engage in it, the further we drift from the truth of who we are. Not because we've lost ourselves, but because we refuse to acknowledge that we are the ones creating ourselves. But here's the twist. Just like Jung's shadow, this self-deception doesn't vanish when we ignore it. It festers. It manifests in boredom, in bitterness, in quiet resentment. We lash out at others for having the courage to be free because deep down, we envy them. The qualities we suppress within ourselves, boldness, honesty, creativity, even joy, don't die. They haunt us from within. And unless we face that, we will always feel like something is missing. Sartre didn't believe in running from this reality. He believed in staring it straight in the face. To live authentically is to accept that you are nothing more and nothing less than the sum of your choices. You are not your past. You are not your title. You are not the roles you've adopted to feel safe. You are your freedom. And the sooner you confront that, the sooner you begin to live. So let me ask you this. Are you still playing a role you didn't write? Or are you ready to face the discomfort of freedom and begin the terrifying, beautiful process of becoming the person only you can choose to be? Through chronic dissatisfaction and the quiet sense that we are not living the life we were meant to live. Sartre would argue that this unease is not a flaw in the human condition. It is the human condition, at least until we stop running. It is the friction between the false self and the terrifying freedom we refuse to claim. You see, freedom isn't just the ability to choose. It's the inescapable obligation to choose. And when we refuse to take ownership of that power, we don't become free. We become fractured. We lose ourselves in routines, in identities we didn't consciously create, in the endless scroll of distraction, all in the name of avoiding the weight of freedom. But no matter how far we run, that weight remains. The unanswered questions don't disappear. They become symptoms: restlessness, anxiety, even despair. Sartre believed that to live authentically, we must break through this wall of self-deception. We must stop lying to ourselves about why we do what we do. We must strip away the illusions, the roles, the comforting lies we've told ourselves to feel safe. Only then can we begin the real work, facing the raw, unfiltered truth of our existence. And here's the paradox. When we stop pretending, when we stop running, when we fully accept that there is no meaning except the one we create, that is when we begin to live. But this doesn't happen by accident. It requires courage. The courage to sit in silence, not to escape it. The courage to listen to the voice you've buried. The courage to be fully responsible for your life, with no excuses, no savior, and no script. This is not a comfortable path. It is not easy, and it was never meant to be. But within that discomfort lies the possibility of something far more powerful than comfort: truth. And with that truth comes the foundation for real, lasting freedom. So ask yourself now, not what you want to be, but who you are when there is nothing left to hide behind. Because it is only in that raw, honest space that something truly new can emerge. Not the person you were told to be, but the person you choose to become. The parts of ourselves that words alone cannot reach. Sartre, while not focused on dreams or symbols in the same way Jung was, arrived at a similar conclusion through a different path. That we must confront ourselves directly, through our choices, our contradictions, and the roles we play when no one is watching. For Sartre, creative expression wasn't just an outlet, it was a declaration of freedom. To create is to affirm our existence, to announce, I am here and I choose to be. But what are we creating? That's the deeper question. Most of us are not creating ourselves. We are reacting. Reacting to fear, to conditioning, to a world that tells us who to be before we ever get the chance to ask who we really are. The unexamined life, as Sartre would say, isn't just unexamined, it's unlived. Because to live without confronting your own freedom is to exist as an echo, not a voice. So how do we begin the existential version of individuation? We start with radical honesty. We ask ourselves the hard questions. Why do I do what I do? Who am I trying to please? What am I avoiding? And most importantly, what would I choose if I truly believed I was free? This process is uncomfortable, even painful. You will uncover truths that shatter your identity. You will realize that many of the things you thought were you were never really yours. They were borrowed from parents, from culture, from fear. But as Sartre would insist, this destruction is not the end, it's the beginning. Because once the illusions are stripped away, you are left with something extraordinary. The space to create yourself anew. And this is the paradox at the heart of existential freedom. It feels like death, because it is. The death of pretense, the death of dependency, the death of every excuse that's kept you from becoming who you are meant to be. But in that death is a kind of rebirth. One not given to you, not inherited, but forged by your own choices. Are you willing to stand in that space, naked, uncertain, responsible, and begin the terrifying, beautiful act of choosing yourself? Because once you do, the world no longer dictates your meaning. You do. Deep-rooted structures of the psyche that he called archetypes. These archetypes are not inherited memories or fixed ideas, but timeless templates that shape the way we perceive ourselves, others, and the world. They are the silent architects of our thoughts, our emotions, our choices. And most of us move through life completely unaware that they are there, guiding us like invisible hands from the unconscious. Sartre approached the question of identity differently, but not oppositely. For him, there were no pre-given patterns, no divine blueprints or cosmic roles. We are, in his words, condemned to be free. That is, we are thrown into a world without inherent meaning, and yet we are forced to choose, to define ourselves, to create who we are. But even Sartre recognized that we often fall into patterns, just not ones given by the universe. Instead, we fall into the ones we create to avoid the burden of our freedom. And here lies the convergence. The archetypes Jung described and the roles Sartre warned against, they both operate in the shadows. The difference is in how we respond. Jung invites us to meet these forces, to understand and integrate them. Sartre demands that we transcend them, to refuse being defined by them. But in both cases, the goal is the same: liberation from unconscious control. So when you find yourself drawn to the same kind of relationship, the same self-sabotaging behavior, the same fear over and over again, it is not fate. It is not who you are. It is a pattern, an internal myth, an inherited script, or a choice you keep making without knowing why. And until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it destiny. But you are not bound to that destiny. You are free, terrifyingly, overwhelmingly free. And that freedom gives you the power to break the cycle, to look at the pattern and say, no more, to stop acting from fear or conditioning and instead to act from awareness, from presence, from the deepest truth of who you are becoming. So here's the question you must ask yourself now. Are you willing to confront the inner forces that shape your life, whether archetypes, wounds, or old choices, and reclaim your freedom from them? Because only when you do can you begin to live a life that is not a repetition of the past, but a conscious creation of the future. When we confront the shadow directly, not to destroy it, but to integrate it. Because the very qualities we fear, reject, or deny in ourselves often hold the keys to our growth. The shadow is not the enemy, it is the test. It is the dragon that guards the treasure, not to keep it from us, but to ensure that only those who are ready to face themselves can claim it. Sartre would agree with the need for confrontation, but not because of archetypes. For him, the enemy is not a dragon from our collective unconscious, but the comfortable lies we tell ourselves. He believed that people live in bad faith, a kind of self-deception where we pretend we have no choice, that we are simply products of our circumstances, our roles, our past. We become the waiter, the parent, the artist, the victim, believing that the role is who we are. But in doing so, we avoid the terrifying truth that we are always free to choose differently. And this is where Sartre's existentialism sharpens the archetypal insight. The moment you become aware of the shadow, or the script you're following, or the role you're stuck in, you are no longer bound by it. You can either continue unconsciously, or you can stop, choose, change. This choice, however, is not easy. It feels like death, because in a way, it is. To become free, you must allow parts of yourself to die. Your attachments to old identities, the comfort of victimhood, the illusion of certainty. And yet, in that death is the birth of something more authentic, more alive, more you. So when you feel the pull of fear, when you hear the voice of self-doubt, when you're standing at the edge of change and everything in you wants to run, recognize what's really happening. The shadow's not trying to stop you. It is inviting you, not to remain who you've always been, but to become who you truly are. The question is, will you answer that call? Because in the next part, we're going even deeper into the existential crisis that lies at the heart of true freedom. You'll learn why stepping into your power is not just liberating, it's terrifying, and why so many people, even after awakening to their truth, still choose the safety of the cage over the uncertainty of real liberation. The strength and the softness, the rational and the intuitive, because only by acknowledging the full spectrum of who you are can you step into wholeness. And yet, embracing this internal balance isn't just difficult, it can feel like betrayal. Betrayal of the identity you've carefully constructed, the version of yourself that others recognize, that society approves of. This is where Sartre's existentialism delivers its sharpest edge. He would say that the moment you recognize these conflicting forces within you, you're also confronted with the responsibility to choose what to do with them. There is no guidebook, no cosmic blueprint, no divine architect waiting to tell you how to live. You are abandoned to your own freedom. And that freedom? It's overwhelming. Most people don't want that level of responsibility. It's easier to be a persona, to stay confined within one archetype, to say, this is just who I am. But that is the illusion. You are not a fixed identity. You are a constant act of becoming. And with every choice you make, you either liberate yourself or reinforce the prison of your past. True self-realization is terrifying because it demands that you abandon certainty. It demands that you let go of borrowed values and hand-me-down beliefs. Sartre would say that when you awaken to this freedom, you experience what he called anguish, a kind of existential vertigo, because there's no one left to blame, no one left to save you. It's just you, standing before the abyss of possibility. But here's the paradox. That abyss is also your path. The place that feels most uncertain is where your true self begins to emerge. Not in comfort, not in conformity, but in the terrifying clarity of your own freedom. The anima, the animus, the shadow, the hero, they are not separate parts. They are voices within you, waiting to be heard. And when you listen, not only do you become whole, you become free. And in the next part, we will explore why that freedom often feels like death. Why breaking free from the false self is not just difficult, but psychologically shattering. And how in the ruins of the identity you once clung to, you can begin to build something far more real, something truly alive. You've held on to all your beliefs, your routines, your goals, even your pain, might not be the full truth of who you are. It means that the person you think you're supposed to be is just a story told by the ego to create order, to protect itself from the vast, unsettling truth that there is no fixed center, no permanent I, only a dynamic process of becoming, unfolding moment by moment. This is where Sartre's existentialism collides violently with Jung's depth psychology. Sartre didn't believe in a hidden, authentic self waiting to be discovered. He believed we are condemned to be free, to invent ourselves from nothing again and again without excuse. That we are the authors of our own meaning and there is no script. No essence precedes existence. You are not born as something, you become. This freedom is radical, and it's terrifying, because without a fixed self, there's no ground to stand on, no solid identity to cling to when life gets uncertain. You are nothing until you choose to be something, and even then, you are only what you choose in that moment. The past doesn't define you. The future doesn't promise you anything. All you have is now. This breath, this decision. But Jung offers a counterbalance, a deeper map. He would say, yes, you are free, but you are also connected to the collective unconscious, to the archetypes, to the ancient patterns that whisper through your dreams and instincts. You are not nothing. You are a vessel for something greater, a field of potential shaped by forces beyond the individual ego. And to realize this is not to lose yourself, but to expand it. And so you are caught between two truths. On one hand, the self is a myth, a construct, an illusion created for survival. On the other hand, it is a doorway to the infinite. You are both the mask and the mystery behind it, the ego and the unconscious, the architect and the clay. And that realization of your own fluid, paradoxical nature is the threshold, the final veil before the real transformation begins. But crossing that threshold, it demands everything, because in the final part, we will explore what it truly means to face this void, to let go of the false self completely, and why true freedom feels like death. But before you go, sit with this moment. Let it settle into your bones. Let it echo in the silent spaces between your thoughts. Because this isn't just information, it's an invitation to live differently, to walk through the world not as a mask, not as a role, a title, or a story, but as the living embodiment of your full, integrated self. You are not here by accident. Everything you've experienced, every wound, every question, every ache and longing has brought you to this point. The point where you are finally able to see yourself clearly. Not just the surface, not just the socially acceptable version, but the full spectrum of who you are. The shadow and the light, the strength and the vulnerability, the chaos and the calm. All of it. You are not broken. You are not missing anything. You are not behind. You are simply in the process of remembering what has always been true, that you are already whole. You have always been whole. Now the question is no longer, who am I supposed to be? It becomes, what within me is waiting to be reclaimed? What parts of myself am I now ready to meet with compassion? What truth have I buried that I am now willing to bring to the light? This is not about perfection. This is about presence, about choosing to meet yourself honestly, moment by moment, about stepping into the unknown, not with fear, but with reverence, because the unknown is not empty, it is alive, and within it lies the path back to yourself. So surrender to the unfolding, release the grip on who you think you need to be, trust the process, and listen. Listen deeply to the voice within that has been waiting all along to be heard. Because life does not truly begin until you find yourself. And now you know the way. Thank you for looking.